Welcome to the Chambers of Confession. Take your seat, hit the like button, and subscribe. Here we listen. We don't judge. Now, let's hear what one of us has to say. I helped my roommate bury someone alive, and I can still hear them screaming through 6 feet of dirt. Look, I'm not going to use real names here. Can't risk it, even after all these years. But this happened, and I need to tell someone before it kills me from the inside out. This was my senior year at a college in the Midwest. I won't say which one. I was rooming with this guy I'll call Marcus in an off-campus house near the edge of town. Old Victorian place, 3 stories, basement that went deeper than it should have. The landlord rented it cheap because of the foundation issues, but we didn't care. We were broke college kids grateful for anything we could afford. Marcus was pre-med, studying to be a surgeon. Brilliant guy, but there was something off about him. He'd dissect frogs in biology lab with this weird intensity, like he was enjoying it too much. He'd watch medical documentaries about operations while eating dinner, commenting on technique like he was critiquing a movie. The basement became his workspace. He set up this makeshift laboratory down there, complete with surgical tools he'd borrowed from the med school, anatomical charts, even a metal table he'd salvaged from somewhere. Said he was practicing procedures, getting ahead for medical school. I should have paid more attention to what he was actually doing down there. The screening started in October. At first, I thought it was the pipes. Old house, weird acoustics, maybe water pressure issues creating strange sounds. But the screening was too rhythmic, too human, and it only happened late at night, usually around 2 or 3 a.m. When I asked Marcus about it, he laughed it off. Probably cats fighting outside, he said. Or maybe the neighbors have their TV too loud. But I knew what I was hearing. Someone was in pain. Someone was calling for help. I started staying awake, trying to track the sounds. They were definitely coming from below us, from Marcus's laboratory in the basement. That's when I discovered what he'd been doing with the homeless people. See, our college town had this problem with transients. People who drift through, camp in the woods behind campus, panhandle downtown. Most students ignored them, but Marcus had been paying attention. Specifically, he'd been paying attention to the ones nobody would miss. The first one he brought home was this old guy I'd seen around the bus station. Dirty, probably mentally ill, the kind of person who talked to himself and smelled like he hadn't bathed in weeks. Marcus said he was helping him, giving him a warm place to sleep in exchange for being a practice patient. Think of it as volunteer work, Marcus explained. He gets food and shelter. I get to practice basic medical procedures. Everyone wins. I was naive enough to believe him. Figured Marcus was just being charitable in his own weird way. But the screaming started 3 days after the old man moved into our basement. I confronted Marcus on a Thursday night when the sounds were particularly bad. Whoever was down there was sobbing, begging, making these awful wet choking noises. What the hell is going on down there? I demanded. Marcus looked at me with these cold, clinical eyes. Research, he said simply. That's when he showed me. The basement wasn't just a laboratory. It was a torture chamber. The old man was strapped to Marcus's metal table, conscious but barely. Marcus had been systematically removing pieces of him, fingers first, then toes, working his way up to more vital areas. He'd cauterize the wounds to prevent bleeding out, keeping his victim alive for as long as possible. I'm studying pain tolerance, Marcus explained, like he was discussing a class project. How much trauma the human body can endure before systems start shutting down. It's fascinating work. I should have run, should have called the police, called someone, done anything except stand there staring at what my roommate had become. But Marcus was holding a scalpel, and there was something in his eyes that told me I wasn't leaving that basement alive if I tried to stop him. "You're going to help me," he said calmly, "or you're going to join him on the table. so I helped. God forgive me. I held the old man down while Marcus continued his research. I watched him carve away pieces of a human being like he was practicing on a cadaver. I listened to the screaming and the begging and did nothing to stop it. The old man lasted 6 more hours. When he finally died, Marcus seemed genuinely disappointed. "Weaker constitution than I expected," he muttered, making notes in a journal. That's when he told me about the others. There had been 4 before the old man. Marcus had been perfecting his technique, learning how to keep subjects conscious and responsive for longer periods. He developed these cocktails of stimulants and painkillers that would prevent shock while amplifying sensation. "The key is balance," he explained while we cleaned up the mess. "Too much anesthetic and you lose the data. Too little and they die from trauma before you can complete the study." Marcus had been disposing of the bodies in a wooded area about 20 miles from campus. Remote location, soft soil, easy to dig. He'd scatter the remains across multiple graves to make discovery less likely. But the old man was different. Marcus wanted to try something new. "I want to see how long someone can survive burial," he said. "How much oxygen they consume. How long consciousness persists. It's the ultimate stress test." The old man wasn't completely dead when we put him in the ground. Marcus had calculated it perfectly. Enough damage to make survival impossible, but not enough to cause immediate death. The old man was conscious when we dragged him to the burial site. Conscious when we lowered him into the hole Marcus had prepared. Conscious when we started shoveling dirt onto his face. I can still hear him clawing at the wooden box Marcus had constructed. Still hear his muffled screams as the dirt piled higher. Still remember the exact moment when the sound stopped, and we knew he'd suffocated. Marcus recorded everything. Timed the whole process, noted changes in the victim's vocalizations, documented the precise moment of death. "Fascinating," he kept saying. "Absolutely fascinating." We buried 2 more people that semester. Marcus would find them, bring them home, conduct his research, then we'd take them to the woods for disposal. I told myself I was trapped, that I had no choice, that Marcus would kill me if I tried to stop him. But the truth is simpler and more horrible. I got used to it. By the 3rd burial, I wasn't horrified anymore. I was curious. I found myself asking Marcus questions about his methods, suggesting improvements to his technique. I started taking my own notes, documenting observations he might have missed. I became his partner, not his victim. Marcus graduated and got into medical school. Last I heard, he's a practicing surgeon somewhere on the East Coast. Probably still conducting his research, just in more official settings. I never saw him again after graduation, but sometimes I wonder if he thinks about those nights in the basement. If he remembers the sounds people make when they're buried alive. If he still keeps journals documenting human suffering. I know I do, because the worst part isn't what we did to those people. The worst part is that I've spent 15 years missing it. Missing the feeling of absolute power over someone else's life and death. Missing the scientific fascination of watching someone's mind break under extreme stress. Missing the partnership Marcus and I had built around shared cruelty. I became a high school teacher after college. Nice, safe job working with kids. Everyone thinks I'm this person who dedicated his life to education. If they only knew what I'm really capable of. If they only knew that sometimes late at night I still hear that scratching sound of fingernails against wood, and sometimes I miss it. I burned 17 people alive in a dormitory fire, and everyone thinks I'm a hero for trying to save them. That's the truth I've been carrying for 12 years now. Every time someone calls me brave, every time they shake my hand and thank me for my courage that night, I want to tell them what really happened, but I can't. Because if they knew the truth, they'd realize that those 17 people died because of me. This happened during my junior year at what I'll just call a large state university in the South. I was living in Morrison Hall, one of those old brick dormitories built in the 1960s that should have been condemned years ago. 4 stories, narrow hallways, fire exits that were always blocked by furniture or locked for security reasons. Everyone knew it was a death trap, but it was cheap housing and most of us were too broke to care about building codes. My roommate that year was this guy I'll call Tommy. We'd been friends since freshman year, both engineering majors, both too smart for our own good. Tommy had this thing about chemistry, specifically pyrotechnics. He'd spend hours in our room mixing compounds, creating little explosive devices, testing combustion rates. It started as curiosity. Tommy would show me these chemical reactions he'd learned about, demonstrate how different substances burned at different temperatures, create these little controlled fires in metal containers. Fascinating stuff, and completely against dormitory rules. But Tommy got obsessed. He started ordering chemicals online, setting up this elaborate laboratory in our room. Potassium nitrate, sulfur, charcoal, magnesium strips. Our room smelled like a fireworks factory, and I was too fascinated by the science to tell him to stop. The night it happened, we'd been drinking. Not unusual for a Thursday night, but we'd gone harder than normal. Tommy had gotten hold of some new compound he wanted to test, something he'd synthesized himself based on instructions he'd found in some underground chemistry forum. This stuff burns hot, he explained, measuring out portions with the precision of a pharmacist. Like really hot, hot enough to melt steel. He wanted to test it outside, but it was raining, and we were both too drunk to care about safety protocols. So we decided to test it in our room, in one of Tommy's metal containers, with the window open for ventilation. The mixture ignited faster than either of us expected. Tommy had miscalculated something. Instead of a controlled burn that would consume itself in the container, the chemical reaction created this intense white flame that immediately spread to his chemical supplies. Suddenly, our room was full of smoke and these bright, impossible flames that seemed to eat everything they touched. We tried to put it out, threw water on it, which only made it worse. The flames spread to Tommy's bed, then to his desk, then to the curtains. Within minutes, our entire room was an inferno. That's when we should have pulled the fire alarm. Should have evacuated the building immediately. Should have done what any rational person would do when faced with an uncontrollable fire. But we were drunk, panicked, and thinking about consequences instead of safety. See, if we pulled that alarm, if we reported the fire, the investigation would reveal Tommy's illegal chemical laboratory. We'd be expelled, probably face criminal charges, definitely lose our scholarships. Our futures would be destroyed. We can contain it, Tommy insisted, even as the flames spread to my side of the room. We just need to get everyone out quietly, then deal with the fire ourselves. So instead of pulling the alarm, we started running through the hallways, banging on doors, telling people there was a small electrical fire and they should evacuate as a precaution. We made it sound routine, non-urgent, like a drill. Most people were asleep. It was almost midnight on a Thursday, and Morrison Hall was quiet except for the occasional stereo or late-night study session. We went door to door, telling people to leave the building calmly, that maintenance was handling a minor issue. The problem was the fire wasn't minor, and it wasn't contained. While we were doing our floor-by-floor evacuation, the flames had spread from our room into the hallway. The old building's ventilation system was pulling smoke and superheated air through the walls, and Tommy's chemical mixture was burning so hot it was igniting things that shouldn't have been flammable. By the time we realized how bad it was, the stairwells were filling with smoke. I made it out, got to the ground floor, stumbled outside, and looked back to see flames shooting out of third-floor windows. That's when I realized that not everyone had made it out with us. The fire department arrived within 10 minutes, but it was too late. The building's ancient fire suppression system had failed. The stairwells were impassable, and 17 people were trapped on the upper floors. I watched them die. Taurus stood in the parking lot with the other survivors, watching people appear at windows, screaming for help, begging to be rescued. The fire department did everything they could, but the building went up too fast. Those old dormitories were built with materials that don't meet modern fire codes, and Tommy's chemical mixture burned hot enough to weaken the building's structural supports. The whole thing collapsed within an hour. 17 people died because Tommy and I were too selfish and too scared to pull a fire alarm when we should have. But here's the thing that makes it worse, the thing that's eaten at me for 12 years. When the investigators questioned survivors, I lied. I told them I'd been asleep when I smelled smoke. Said I'd gone door to door trying to wake people up as soon as I realized there was a fire. Made myself sound like a hero who'd risked his life trying to save his fellow students. Tommy backed up my story. We rehearsed it, got our details straight, made sure we looked like victims instead of perpetrators. The investigation concluded that the fire started from faulty electrical wiring in an unoccupied room. Old building, old systems, tragic but unavoidable accident. They never found evidence of Tommy's laboratory because everything had been consumed in the blaze. I was featured in the local newspaper as one of the heroes of Morrison Hall. Student risks life to save others. They interviewed my parents, who talked about how proud they were of their brave son. The university gave me a commendation for my selfless actions during a campus tragedy. Tommy transferred schools the next semester. Couldn't handle being on campus anymore, he said. Last I heard, he was working as a chemical engineer somewhere in Texas. We never talked about that night again. I stayed and finished my degree. Graduated with honors, got a good job, built what everyone considers a successful life. But every year on the anniversary of the Morrison Hall fire, the university holds a memorial service for the 17 students who died. And every year I attend, I sit in the back listening to speeches about tragedy and loss and the fragility of life. I watch family members cry for children who died in a fire that I started. I observe moments of silence for people who would be alive if I just pulled a fucking fire alarm instead of worrying about my own future. The worst part is that people still recognize me at these services, still come up to shake my hand, still thank me for trying to save their loved ones. Parents whose children burned to death while I stood in a parking lot watching it happen. Thank you for trying, they say. It means so much to know that someone cared enough to risk their life for our son. I nod and accept their gratitude and hate myself more each year. Because the truth is, I didn't try to save anyone. I tried to save myself. And when that became impossible, I invented a story that would make me look heroic instead of culpable. 17 people died because I was a coward twice. Once when I failed to pull the fire alarm, and again when I lied about it afterward. I've thought about confessing, writing letters to the families, telling the truth about what really happened that night. But it's been 12 years. What good would it do now? It wouldn't bring anyone back. It would just destroy more lives, including my own. So I carry it. This knowledge that I'm not the person everyone thinks I am. That my entire adult life has been built on a foundation of lies and 17 corpses. Sometimes I wonder if Tommy thinks about it too. If he lies awake at night remembering the sound people make when they're burning alive. If he ever considers telling the truth. But I don't think he will, just like I won't. Because some truths are too heavy to share, even when they're killing you from the inside. Even when they should be told. That's all for tonight, Chamberlains. What are your thoughts? Share them in the comments. And if you have a confession you'd like the chamber to listen to, do not hesitate. Forward them. Remember, we listen. We don't judge. Subscribe and don't forget to hit the like button. See you in the chambers. Same time, tomorrow.